who I was never enough. And I felt that if somebody truly knew who I was and how I felt on the inside, that nobody would love me.
Who will love me if they really know who I am? That is a question that can echo so loudly in our minds. It feeds shame and keeps us silent, refusing to share the painful parts of our stories.
I physically felt that my body was so disgusting and damaged, that nobody would love my body because of what he did to me. I was 20 years old when I was sexually assaulted. The man who assaulted me, I met at a park where all the college kids hang out. I was in college on a full-ride scholarship, and he just seemed like another young guy that was there having fun. I ended up getting a really bad cold, and he came over to make me chicken noodle soup one night. And he kept telling me that the soup was going to taste extra salty. I don't know what that meant. I just remember being at the table and like having to put my head in my hands. I could not hold my head up. And so I went to bed. And I left him out in my living room. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and going out into the living room, and he was there on my computer. And I said, well, why don't you come to bed? Meanwhile, we had never had sex prior to this. That was not something that I wanted. He knew that was very clear that isn't something that I wanted. So he came to bed and we ended up kissing. He then decided to get on top of me and rape me. And I remember he was this big 6'4", like muscular man, and I remember trying to push him off of me.
Melissa suspects she was drugged, but doesn't know for sure. She's spent many nights, though, confused by a response that seemed so unlike her. She remembers feeling violated and scared, but still calmly walking to the bathroom, and then eventually going back to bed, leaving the man in her living room to find his own way out.
I'm a pretty vocal young woman, and I would think that my reaction in that situation, I would be screaming or freaking out. When I woke up the next morning, he was gone. And I remember trying to figure out, like, well, what do I do? Who do I call? Do I tell anybody? Like, this couldn't have happened to me. And so I wrote an email. And to him, I mean, we knew each other well enough, we had exchanged emails, saying that I was 50% to blame because I had kissed him. Many times the media portrays sexual assault as extremely violent, and that if I wasn't screaming, running out of the room, crying, scared for my life, that it's not assault. And for me, I remember trying to push him off of me and trying to escape in that way and being scared for my well-being. And I think that's important to know, that sexual assault can happen in a way that might not appear as assault because of what we're taught to believe it is.
Melissa only told a few close friends what had happened, and afraid to be in her own home, she also stayed with one of those friends for a couple nights. When she finally got the courage to go back to her house, she received an alarming phone call. A friend had spotted the man on the college campus, and hiding behind sunglasses, he was scouring the crowd, seeming to look for Melissa. She had a really bad feeling.
And they called me and they said, do not walk home. Do not walk home. Whatever you do, we will come get you. Do not walk home. And that's when I knew that I had to report it to the police.
Within a couple days, she was asked to look at mugshots.
There was a photo of him, a younger version of him. They had a photo of him because he had sexually assaulted a minor in California. And he was actually not supposed to be in Washington State.
Learning this happened to someone else was a whisper of the truth she so desperately longed to believe, that this was not her fault, but rather a calculated act from a sexual predator.
I decided I had to tell my family, but I didn't know how to tell them. I didn't know how to say, all the things that you prepared me for, all the times you made me practice saying no to strange men, like here I was, sexually assaulted. And some of my family members met me with, well, you let him into your bed, what did you expect? And that was hard to hear because those were the words that I was worried I would hear. They eventually told me that they weren't going to pursue my case because there wasn't enough evidence. I had reported it too late, and I had emails saying that it was 50% my fault. They did end up finding him, and they found him because he did it to somebody else. And to me, that was like relief to know that he was found, but also I took on a lot of the shame and guilt, thinking that if I would have reported sooner, maybe it wouldn't have happened to her.
The weight of the guilt and the shame was all-consuming, and on top of that, Melissa was also advised to stay quiet.
I was taught not to tell people because they would judge me. I was told that I was not dateable because it was something that somebody would have to live with for the rest of their lives too. So then I started living this life of perfection to hide all of those things that were happening on the inside. I remember wanting to get hit by a car, like get in a car accident. Not because I wanted to die, not because it was like a suicidal thought, but because if I got in a car accident and got injured, somebody would take care of me and they would know how to take care of me.
To begin to put her broken pieces back together, she had to start paying attention and making space for the moments that triggered her.
One thing that I didn't realize would be a trigger, and that is I went to the gym and took a weights class. And I remember the motion of pushing the weight up, like the barbell up, and that totally triggered me. And it was the same motion that I was using to push him off of me. Sexual trauma is such a physical thing, and I think that we don't give enough credit to our body and what it's trying to communicate. So for me in that moment, it was communicating, you still have some of that stored trauma in you, and we need to work through this.
Most of us have been taught that triggers are bad, but Melissa wants to remind everyone of the healing power that lies within them. No matter what trauma you've experienced, when you notice your thoughts start to spiral, that is your clue to stop and pay attention. They're there to show us the areas in our heart that still need healing. The Me Too movement was essentially a call to action for Melissa. On the one hand, she felt like less of an outsider, knowing she wasn't alone. But on the other hand, she was still looking for more than that.
I recognized I wasn't alone, but I struggled with saying Me Too, and then what? Because the trauma doesn't go away from saying Me Too. That's part of the healing process, absolutely. That acknowledgement piece is such a part of the healing process. But then what? I wanted to know that there were other women who had been sexually assaulted that felt the shame and the disgust, that found it hard to be intimate with their partners. The less that I saw myself in another, the more I felt this need to be perfect. But I couldn't figure out how everybody else, if this is such a prominent thing, how is everybody else surviving so well, and yet behind closed doors I'm sitting on the floor crying in the kitchen.
In Melissa's search to feel seen, a power greater than herself started speaking to her. She needed to be the more she was searching for.
I chose to live by the words, if you do not see her, you have to be her. And for me, what that meant is if I didn't see another sexual assault survivor speaking openly about her experience and what life looked like after, then I needed to be her. I don't know where the words came from, but if you do not see her, you have to be her just kept ringing, almost like a constant echo. At first, I didn't want to be her. I didn't want to be the one to remove her masks and talk about what life really looked like behind closed doors.
Everywhere Melissa turned, she was getting the same message: share your story.
I wrote the book, Who Will Love Me? A Holistic Approach to Building Meaningful Relationships After Sexual Assault. One of the things that I struggled with the most was building meaningful relationships, dating relationships, friendships, even relationships with my family, because I didn't know how to build a real meaningful relationship and also mask everything that I was feeling. With my family, we now have a phenomenal relationship. My friendships, I am meeting the most phenomenal women, and even in my dating life. It took me loving myself and learning to love those imperfections and know that who I am is enough. I don't want to, once again, kind of the old me, paint that picture of perfection like I've got it all together and I've got it figured out, because I don't. I think that in learning to love the imperfections, there's so much beauty in that, and knowing that I don't have to be perfect and can still make a difference.
Melissa's book just got picked up by a publisher and will hit bookstore shelves in July of 2020. Her biggest message for every sexual assault survivor is simply this:
that healing is possible. And you know what? Not every day is going to be perfect. I still struggle. I still get triggered, but that doesn't mean that I'm not healing. And I think that healing is kind of the end goal, but I think we're on this continuum, right? And here's healing and here's me totally triggered. There's this continuum that we work in between. And some days I'm going to be way up here on the healing scale, and some days I might be triggered. But learning to live in that and know that that's okay is also healing. I see you, I hear you, I love you, I am you, with my whole heart. Melissa Ann.